So how do you break the cycle of emotional eating? So let's dive in. And if you're new here, welcome. My name is Michelle. I'm a certified holistic nutritionist specializing in emotional eating. And today I wanted to talk about how you can break the cycle of your emotional eating. Emotional eating feels like this thing that keeps on happening, and sometimes it happens and you might not emotionally eat for years and years, and all of a sudden you're triggered into emotional eating. I've seen this with clients, and this usually happens when you haven't gotten into the root of your emotional eating. You haven't really found a way that you can use to create that change around your emotional eating. So usually what happens is when life is more easeful or you feel more at peace or calmer, you're not triggered as much into your emotional eating. You have more capacity. You can maybe fight your urges. Maybe in the background, you've been fighting these urges, but you haven't, been in this pattern. Or big life things happen or stressful events happen, and all of a sudden you don't know how to deal with them. And so food becomes your outlet. I hear this from clients who are able to willpower through their diets, through all of these different strategies, and then it's like it doesn't work anymore. They can't do it anymore. So how do we break out of this emotional eating cycle? So we have to get into the root. We need to really understand the pattern and be aware of it and do the deeper work that we haven't done yet on this pattern and understand why we've been going to food all these years. So in order to break the cycle of your emotional eating, you need to understand what emotional eating is. So emotional eating is a coping mechanism. And it means that whenever you have distress, stress, uncomfortable emotions come up in your life, you go towards food. And this would have been a pattern you developed when you were really young. And like I said, when life is more calm, more at ease and peace, there's no trigger. There's not that overflow of stress or triggers to really make you go towards food, or it's manageable. So you can do the diets, you can willpower. But when it sort of really hits you in those core root areas and those core wounds, and you have all of this stress and maybe trauma that comes up, there's no way to fight your emotional eating. The pattern takes over because you don't know how to soothe yourself. You don't know how to actually work through whatever's coming up. And so you need to be aware of emotional eating is a coping mechanism. And a lot of my clients, they've tried all the things and they could do it for many years, and they come to me when nothing is working because they haven't dealt with this deeper layer. And so why do we develop this coping mechanism is because of trauma. And trauma is not meant to be a scary word. Trauma is something that happens on a spectrum. So we can have little t traumas or big T. And I've worked with clients along that spectrum, but more often than not, what I find is the little t traumas of not being seen and heard and valued, accepted as you are from a young age, which I think are actually big traumas. They start just compounding. And when we don't have these really vital needs met for us as little people, we feel this shame and discomfort, and we have to cope. And that's where food comes in to soothe us from this discomfort, to kind of numb us from these emotions. And it doesn't mean we ever resolve that shame or that trauma underneath. And so food becomes a thing whenever it's triggered. So we might be going about our life, and if it's calm and we're not getting triggered, we're not going to go to food. But the moment that we get triggered, or what I've seen with clients, sometimes they're going through bigger phases of their life. Maybe they go through a breakup, they go through a divorce, or just something happens bigger in their life and they're triggered into their emotional eating. And so we want to be aware of what's going on in our life and how we're using emotional eating as this coping mechanism. And emotional eating, you can break this cycle by becoming aware that it is a coping mechanism. It helps you to dive deeper into what's actually triggering this pattern. What are your triggers? And so triggers can be big. So it can be obvious you're going through a breakup or a divorce or, some other bigger issue in your life. Maybe someone is sick in your family, and so you have a lot of stress coming up from that. But triggers can be the little day-to-day interactions that just don't seem to go away. So I've had clients, they go to a work meeting, they're interacting with friends in their day-to-day life. That little voice keeps pinging them and making them feel shame, and they keep going to food, and so their emotional eating is happening more daily. So they're around family members that are digging into them or triggering them or making comments about them. This happens a lot around the holidays. And so your emotional eating has always been there, and maybe you've been able to, not be around those people or to push away those comments. But what's happening is that it exists. These triggers are there, whether they're big or small. Underneath them are traumas, whether they're big or small. And we need to really look at that. And that's what's going to help us break this cycle. And so that's just sort of like a high level of what's going on. And when we are able to really resolve those traumas, those things that are creating our emotional eating, that's how we resolve the root. And we need to recognize those triggers and to start meeting our true needs versus going to food, which is like a substitute, a band-aid for our needs. And so it's in that doing that deeper work of meeting our true needs and learning a new way to do that, because we weren't taught that. So if we have this type of coping mechanism, it means that our emotions weren't really validated. We weren't able to move through them, and our parents or caregivers couldn't model that to us. And so we had to figure out a way to cope with this discomfort. And so how do we move through this? Because emotional eating is this sort of multi-layered pattern. It's not just about meeting your needs. We have this relationship to food that also impacts us, and our body, the shame we feel around our body ties into this pattern as well. And then of course, how we are with our emotions. So there are 3 different areas we need to look at with working with this pattern. Food is important in looking at this pattern because we need to recognize when we're emotionally hungry versus truly hungry. When we have emotional hunger, this is going to give us a gateway into what might be triggering us. And so it might be obvious in your day-to-day life, or it might not be obvious. It might be more subtle. And the more we're able to nourish ourselves and really connect to our bodies, because a lot of emotional eaters are not connected to the food in our bodies because we're trying to control so much, and we usually are in a lot of diets and restriction. We need to find that trigger for that emotional hunger. And the same around our body. We need to be honoring our body's needs and not shaming it and dismissing the needs of our body, because that shame spirals us into emotional eating. That's how we deal with discomfort and stress and shame, is we emotionally eat. So we have to look at what is triggering that around our body. And then of course our emotions. We need to learn how to actually integrate, process these emotions under the emotional eating, get into those traumas and resolve them at a root level, meet our true needs, so that we are now giving ourselves what we actually need versus using food as a substitute. And when we're able to do this, this is how we break the cycle of emotional eating. It's not just you avoid food or you willpower your way. There's so many levels going on. Your relationship to food, your body, and your emotions are going to become really important in resolving this and breaking this cycle. And so what I see with clients is when we move through these steps, their emotional eating, we start to pinpoint the triggers and the deep root causes of it, and we start working with that deeper layer in the body and start resolving those traumas. And they have the tools now, when they recognize that they're triggered into emotional eating, to go into the trigger, get to the root of it and resolve it. And when you meet your true needs, you won't go to food, you won't emotionally eat. And that's how you start dissolving the pattern. And so this was my journey as well. When I first started, I had to work with this step by step, and my emotional eating lessened and lessened. And now it's been over 10 years since I've emotionally eaten, because I recognize when I'm triggered, and because I've been meeting my inner needs when I get triggered emotionally, I know what to do with that, to process those emotions, to get into the root of it, to see what I want, versus my brain jumping into a band-aid like food, like I did when I was younger and sort of going through this pattern myself. And so when you meet your true needs, food cannot fill that void. And so if you want to get started on this journey, the first place to start is to really start discerning your true hunger from your emotional hunger and catching your triggers. And so I have a free guide called What Are You Truly Hungry For? If you want to get started on that, there'll be a link below. It's a great first place to start, and it's what I recommend to all of my clients when they start the program. This is the first step in resolving their pattern. And if you are ready to resolve your emotional eating, you want some more support and guidance, you want the step-by-step process and the in-depth tools to create that change in a sustainable way and to resolve this pattern from the root, to break this cycle, then you can find out more about the Emotional Eating Evolution Program. This is my 12-week container that has a support, guidance, the step-by-step process, and the in-depth tools, one-to-one sessions with me to really get into the pattern and resolve it so that you can get to ease, peace, and confidence around food and in your body in a sustainable way. So you can find out more at the links below. Thank you so much for watching. If you have any questions, please let me know. Please be sure to like and subscribe, and I look forward to sharing more with you, and I hope you have a great day.